Okay, so then my next question regarding newer trainers is you were talking earlier, Brett, about the training mindset. I mean, you were just talking right now about having a strategy, right? And that was more in regards to like sales, to getting a client on board.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to actually working with dogs, what would you say to newer trainers? Like, how did you develop the appropriate mindset and strategy to be working with these types of dogs?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say that I took a little different route. Okay, I actually, and this all goes to challenging yourself and further your education. I'm going to get to it. I'm a very neuroscience-y guy. I love that stuff. So what I did was I did a session with an ethologist, and I actually told them my program. You know, well, they actually, we kind of teamed up, to be honest. Her name is Shelly from Ingle Nuke Academy. I highly recommend talking to her. She's got more knowledge than I do, but the difference is she speaks in bigger words. But she's amazing. That being said, yeah. So basically, the one thing that I learned by talking to her was clarity and consequence, and that changed everything for me. Clarity, consequence, and accountability. So let's talk about that with the newer trainers. What does that mean, right?
Yeah.
When you are sitting here, and I would love every newer trainer to really think about this. When you're sitting there and a dog doesn't perform, was there clarity? You know, you perform a consequence, was there clarity? Because I don't know, I'm going to make up numbers, but I'm guessing 99% of the time, the dog didn't understand the expectation before the consequence. Now, there are times, like, my puppy knows, stay away from Nala. And she knows, because when I'm there, she doesn't, the second I walk out, she attacks Nala. She knows, right? So I may perform a consequence of spatial pressure, emotional pressure, you know? But the bottom line is, you know, when we sit here and dog to sit, you know, why isn't it not listening? Does it not understand the command? Does it not understand the command in that area? Is it too emotional to be able to understand? Does it feel vulnerable? You know, and the bottom line is, you know, the dog has to trust you, trust the environment, and then trust you in that environment.
Right.
You sit here and you stress out your dog and force it into that situation, you're losing trust in that environment, and it's going to ruin your goals. So I would just always say to people, balance trainers, when they're sitting here and they're, you know, when we're working dogs, understand clarity and consequence. You know, it's very, very important.
We're talking clarity. What about clarity of consequence? Like I meet a lot of owners and trainers who their understanding of when the correction should have taken place, in my opinion, is correct. Like they were going after the right thing. Right. Like the timing was right, but it was a big mess. Like an example being, I hate when I'll hear actually one of my training assistants does this a lot. She has a bad habit of, like, when she has to correct something, however minor, she talks a lot. Like for example, she's my training assistant who really likes to focus specifically on puppies. She does great with them, lots of food work, lots of praise, lots of, like, she's really good at doing leash pressure with harness stuff. Really fascinating to watch, actually. Yeah. And I understand that a lot of it is geared toward, like, I'm more interested in building this dog up than necessarily sending out a really sharp-looking, obedient dog, because we can always work on that later, right? Yeah. But here's a gripe that I have, you know, that I told her about the other day, was she has this habit. So the dog, let's say, is in place in the kitchen, and there's another puppy over here in place in the living room, and the dog gets up. Instead of being clear, no, down, good, right? Or stay, or whatever the case, right? She has the habit of being like, hey, no, where are you going? You know, and I'm like, hey, you got to stop, like, be clear. Like, you know, give the command, not only that the dog can understand, right? Because it's simple. It's, you mark it, you reinforce it, you start to build those paths. But what are you doing to the client? When they ask me, Mariano, the dog moves, what do I say? I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you tell them, lay down, you know. I'm like, okay, you say no, and then you say the command, you know, and then you go from there, right? So I had to remind her, like, listen, be very clear and concise, and, you know, and you can offer more direction if you need to, but it ain't going to be in the form of like, no, you know, it's going to be more in the form of like, no, down, and the dog doesn't, down, food, you know. So I want to make sure that you know, I just want to make sure I get your take on, like, what about clarity of consequence?
That's a big thing too. If you're gonna, I mean, here's the deal. The dog has to connect it to the behavior. How often are they even able to do that? If I sit here and the dog, let's say a dog sits here, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you say down and the dog doesn't. And then you get, you form a correction. Half the time the dog has no idea. A lot of times the dog isn't listening or complying. A lot of times because there wasn't enough motivation to do it. So when you sit here and you create, I guess an aversive response, you're not doing anything. You're going to perform an aversive. I mean, if the dog knows the behavior, knows it, and then chooses not to, but knows it, right? Because he performed it 100 times for you, and then you want to do an aversive, that dog's going to say, you know what? I'm just going to do the right thing to avoid and also avoid the discomfort.
Right.
And that's the thing. That's what we call proofing. But we jump to like you said it, and we jump too quick. I have a friend in the UK who's an amazing dog trainer, and he's a awesome guy, and he has a heavy hand, a really heavy hand, right? But because of the shit he deals with like really nasty mouths, right? So and I've seen his work and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Like he's saving dogs from being put down that should be put down, right? But he even said to me, no, don't correct your puppy. Don't do that. Don't do that. No. You're just gonna, your puppy's gonna tell you to fuck off if you correct it. But he did say, after a year, Brett, then you're gonna fucking crack him. I'm like, all right, okay. But he's advocating for the puppy. He's like, after a year, when that dog knows the right thing to do. And a lot of us don't want to wait a year because it's frustrating. But here's the deal, like, you got it with 4 up to like 5 months, capture behaviors. Everything is just captured. I do not have an expectation of my puppy to walk good on a leash. Right. By the way, my puppy's walking phenomenal leash. All I did was capture the behavior, capture the behavior. I got her tractable. Waiting for her tractable. She comes back, capture the behavior. And now she's just like, I'm just gonna hang out here.
Yeah, right.
Whether I have food or not. It's like honestly, it's like tear jerking. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. But when she's 6 months, she's gonna tell me to fuck off because puppies are focused on their owner, dogs are focused on the environment. She'll kind of go away, but then I'll sit here and I'll go back to doing what I need to do. Right. And then honestly, by the time she's, maybe a little bit older, then maybe we'll sit here and focus on more compliance. Right. But I will focus on compliance. Right. But I'll say you gotta get those people.
Yeah, no, I that's how I raised my Doberman. A lot. I didn't probably put a correction on him till. Well, I take that back because Mariano was there with me. He had a very big whining problem, and I gave him a couple corrections for that. But he stopped.
Whining, he means squelching.
Like, and I did every protocol you could think of, and I'll say it here on the podcast. I put a remote collar on a 12-week-old puppy at a 2 to get him to stop, and it worked.
So why do you think he stopped?
Because he was avoiding the discomfort of that, or made him present.
No.
What is it?
You activated the cerebral cortex.
Because he was a big ball of emotion.
He felt the stim, and he said, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah.
And he was more curious about that stim than he was about it being emotional.
100%. So that was it.
Because if you hurt him, he'd continue to cry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, he'd be scared. So that's actually a really fascinating delineation because.
But let me finish the story.
Go ahead.
Well, the story is, then I didn't put any leash correction on that dog till like 8-9 months. You know what I mean? But everything was harness, retractable, same thing. And that boy, boy is still, he makes 85 to 90% good decisions without my influence, right?
That's awesome.
And obviously he makes shitty decisions sometimes because he's a dog, but I feel that I have influence over him. And that's because we have that bond and that understanding.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. What were you saying, Mara?
So that brings up a fascinating delineation, the way that you would describe that like, and as you say it, it reminds me of like seeing Dynamite feel the collar, and it's just kind of this feeling of like, "Meh, what was
Dynamite's
that?"
my
And he's
dog,
kind
by the way.
of looking around. So the reason why that's so fascinating to me, the way you describe that, is because you were talking about like knowing your stuff, like being able to explain exactly what you're doing. And I think of trainers who I like, by the way. So this isn't a knock, but I think of trainers like Sean O'Shea, Jeff Gelman, Tom Davis, who they kind of took the more like, in my opinion, the more like streamlined route, which has value, of course, right? I mean, obviously, look how well all of them are doing. But when I say streamlined, I mean they don't really dive too much into like this level of like sciencey talk, at least not with clients, and at least not with like videos and stuff like that. They just kind of keep it straight to the point, which honestly I really do feel the value of, because I'm one of those people who sometimes I dissect something so much that I feel like I'm losing, like, I feel like, am I being too much right now?
It's and it's funny. It's when you really understand, like, I mean, there's nothing I'm going to teach you. You know the stuff, but now you're understanding why, and that makes it more powerful.
Yeah.
Right.
Because then you can make better decisions.
No,
we've.
Sorry, and I agree with you. I guess my point being, there's also a really powerful phenomenon, whatever it is, to people just being very simple. Because the client sits there and is like, oh, I completely understood every little thing you just said. It wasn't a matter of like, go Google it later. It wasn't a matter, it was just like they have a great talent for framing it in a way that the person gets. Straight up regular language, like I was talking to somebody at a bar, but regarding stuff, right? And so I bring this up because you were saying Dynamite was more interested, like more fascinated, more curious, right? I mean, same, by the sensation of the collar, because it was a low stim, right?
Yeah, so problem solving stage.
Right. So he was very fascinated, curious by the collar, which is why he kind of fell out of his emotional side and started thinking, like, oh, what is this? Well, what was this? He's calculating now. Like, what was that thing that just happened to me, right? And a lot of these guys, without explicitly explaining that, I know that they know that based on how they train, but I'd like to speak with them about, I'd like to hear their their version of that explanation is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's not going to be the same.
No, I know, but you understand what I'm getting at, though, because like you just said, you know the information. I'm watching you work dogs. I know I know what was just said.
Yeah.
But I want to hear you explain it, just because I'm just like that. I like to hear these different things and just kind of absorb.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Something interesting from my perspective, right? So when you asked me that question, well, why do you think Dynamite? It's so funny because if it was a client's dog, I'd have an answer for you. But this was my thought process before putting it, right? This was the thought process. I knew that I didn't want the correction to come from me. And I knew that all the work and the positive stuff that we were doing relaxation protocols, we were doing a lot of place commands, we were doing a lot of chewing and a lot of all this, basic puppy stuff. And I just I can't put a lead on him and give him a correction. I can't do it. I can't. This something didn't feel right, so I said, "All right, I'm going to put this e-collar, get him at a 2, and within a day, it's done. Literally done. He'd wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, not having to pee, and it was so interesting. Like, there's so many things with my own puppy that as soon as it was framed in my dog, I didn't have an answer for you. And that was what you were talking about earlier, where like you got to raise a puppy, and you got to like how you train your own dogs is very different. And
it's a big deal, and it's I was I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but it's just it's
but it made me reflect. It made me reflect. Like that's what I would explain to a client, but I was in the chair, you know what I mean? And so it's really cool. Yeah, it was really cool to reflect and be like, yeah, we're human too. Like, I'll tell my clients, I'll be like, it's been a long time since I haven't been a dog trainer. Can you guys give me insight on what you're experiencing right now? And that's a real thing. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Brett? And again, please feel free to be 100% upfront, disagree, whatever. Okay. So, So since we were talking earlier about it being difficult to find somebody who's willing to just look at something analytically, right? Moves and counter moves, right? If you do this, then you can do that, but understand that this comes with that decision, right? So how do you feel about, I know that there's a big divide in the balanced world between this trainer and that trainer who they're like, oh, well, this one is too open about correcting for certain behaviors. Or like, and we're talking two balanced trainers. Like they both give corrections. They both even use the same tools. Maybe they use them differently. I'm not quite sure. But here's here's an example of like an explanation that I've given to my trainers. And I can totally see why people would take issue with this, which if you do, then tell me, okay? So I was talking about this. So these two trainers in regard, to my training assistant. And I was explaining to her like, hey, so check this out. I get why trainers are, they want to make sure that you're not like causing, like you said, this unintended fallout, this unintended consequence, right? Make sure that you're being clear. But clarity means understanding all of the picture because everything's got something as a downside, right? So you have to kind of weigh these things out. So my example then of the opposite, talking about the other trainer who was really like open with their content, with correcting dogs and stuff. Was here's a very serious question. At what point is this fallout, this consequence, intentional and maybe even helpful? And my example was snake avoidance training. If you've ever seen snake avoidance training, it's messed up, right? It's like high level correcting dogs for their curiosity, like you talked about. You're subduing the dog's curiosity, but you're doing it on purpose for the dog's safety, right?
Okay, I get it.
And I have this kind of annoyance with snakes because my favorite client dog ever, this guy, he was killed by a snake. He's actually my logo for my company, and
oh shit.
And so,
oh my God, yeah. So I get it. I get it. Now here's the deal. Like I said before, I apply punishment when I think it will give the dog a better life, right? For the dog and the human, but I sit here and I mean, you got to see what the goal is. So here's the problem I have. Let me tell you the problem I have with the balance training community, right? A lot of them, they don't understand what the difference between, they don't know what suppression looks like. A lot of people don't understand dog body language. How many times have I seen on social media and I've called people out, called them directly, messaged them and been honest because I like them and care about them. But there's so many people I've said, you're sitting here saying, look how happy this dog is. Guess what? That dog is showing you appeasement. Appeasement is not happy. We have fight, flight, freeze, and appease. Those are two other options that the dogs take. Appeasement is no different than fight, right? So if the dog is just appeasing you, it's going to take, you got a false positive. That dog's going to take a chunk at you the second opportunity comes, right?
It's still
and I see people. What's up?
It's still a stress response.
Absolutely. So the problem is a lot of times when they're correcting and they think and they're saying this is a finished product and you have just appeasement, well then you got a false positive and that was shit. Everything was for nothing. If you're going to sit here and correct a dog or punish the fuck out of a dog, then you need to focus on reconciling. Reconcile. Rebuild that dog, make it right, make it better. Get me a happy dog. You get me a happy dog. I don't care. All right, do whatever you got to do. Get me a happy dog. But I want to see. I don't want to see a dog. I mean, obviously, if there's genetics, we can't fight genetics. Then you have to do what you have to do. Right. Man, it's management all the way.
Right.
But if you really want to sit here and brag, I want to see the dog curious about other dogs. I want to see the dog realize that threat is not a threat. I could look at it, but I choose to play with you. So when I work with dogs, reactivity or aggression, I let the dog go in front of me. I let the dog load. And I try to go as far back as possible. And then what happens is, if I've done my programming right, the dog looks is loading.
And then checks for you real quick.
Looks back at me, looks at the dog or human, looks back at me, and then takes a step towards me. When that dog takes a step towards me, now we have ourselves a party. But I don't, when the dog looks back at me, I don't yes him. I wait till he actually disengages completely, takes a step towards me.
It's like a cutoff cue.
Like choose me. Because if that's the case, the next time the dog could look at the trigger and just look back at me. And the next time the dog could look at the trigger and just go about our walk. Do you see how that just leveled up little by little? That's how it's going to happen. But if I sit here and I correct the dog every time it looks at the trigger, there's time and place to do it. but know the end goal needs to be that dog is fine and it's not a threat. Because if you don't have that, then you have a false positive. Now, not every dog is butterflies and sunshine is going to get there. Some dogs are genetic messes and they need to be managed. And I get that. But I'm not going to lie and be like, yeah, this dog is a. I'm going to say, yeah, this dog, obviously, it will be managed for the rest of its life. And that's just the point. We are going to get this dog to avoid everything. It's avoidance. It's appeasement. That's fine.
Right.
And you may have to come back to me every 6 months for tune-up.
Right. And I ask because so I agree with you in the build-up process, but it almost is like a separate argument to me because I don't think that the disagreement is there. I think that the two dog trainers that like disagree, I don't think either of them think like the correction and then it's a done deal. My fascination comes in, like where I really want to hear your thoughts are, Brent was talking about Dynamite about, I don't want to give the dog the correction. Like, I don't want to be the one offering this correction, right? I kind of want the dog to like stop whining, but I don't want it to be because I stopped you. And I know that there's a difference there.
Yeah.
So in snake avoidance, it's similar because even if you like, I guess the downside of audibly saying the word no is clever dogs won't do it when dad's around.
Yes, you're right.
And that's where I wanted to hear your thoughts on things like, that's partially why I was using snake avoidance training, because I want the dog to fear the snake, not me telling them don't go to the snake. I want them to see it and be like, fuck that, whether I'm there or not, right? And the other fascinating element of it,
What's the question?
I'm framing. Hang on.
Okay.
The other fascinating element of it is I want the dog to, like, it's rare in snake avoidance training that I see dogs afraid of everything. It's not like you correct at a high level and the dog's like, fuck life altogether. They're scared of the snake if your timing is correct. So my question then is, how do you feel about utilizing things, e-collar or not, whatever, just e-collar's easy with it because it's off leash, to build those inhibitors when you're not directly related? Like, I don't want the dog to not do it because you said so. I want the dog to not do it because they don't want to do it.
Yeah, here's the deal. If I go eat a slice of pizza and you pour vinegar on it and I didn't see you do it, and I'm going to think that's disgusting. And then if I get a second slice and it tastes exactly the same and I didn't see you do it, after 5 slices, I'm never going to have pizza again. I'm not going to blame you for it. But if if I didn't see you do it and dogs live their life to seek pleasure, avoid discomfort. If the snake is uncomfortable, the dog is going to avoid it. But if you are the one creating the discomfort, then it's a little more difficult, But I mean, you got to understand there's fallout. You know what I mean? Because if the dog finds a snake discomfort and then all of a sudden feels cornered by the snake, it may just attack because it's back there in the corner. You know what I mean? But overall, the odds of that happening are very slim because we could just teach the dog to avoid. That's uncomfortable. Avoid. So I don't think, you know what I mean? I don't think there's anything wrong with that if it's done right. And yeah, in a situation like that, I would prefer an e-collar for snake avoidance training. It's easier. I've done similar stuff. One of the programs I used an e-collar, it was an issue with the baby, right? Mm-hmm. We wanted the baby to be uncomfortable, and it was just. But there was by the way there was so much more in depth to the program. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want the baby to corner the dog and then get mauled, but it was just. We actually used the doll first, and had the dog avoid the doll that looked like a baby. And then, the doll was like at the end of a stick, it was like, so we did a lot, and we taught the dog escape training and things like that. But it was same concept, but we did understand that the fallout could have been, God forbid, the baby puts too much pressure on the dog, and they knew that, but they had to live their life.
That's where the management system comes in.
Yeah, and management. It was a lot. Not, by the way, not a people doing great, but the only thing I say to that is if you're ever going to add stress, right, you have to build confidence first. Mm-hmm. That's it. Because if I have a dog that's stressed out all the time and I add stress, it's a bad recipe. I need a bomb-proof dog. You know, so with the, you know, that's pretty much the first. And then because then if I add stress to stress, they're not going to realize it. They're not going to know how to turn it off because they're always stressed out.
Right.
You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a drop in the ocean.
Did that answer your question, Mariano?
Did it?
Yes. Yeah, it did. I mean, yeah. I mean, my only other question then is how do you personally start working with a dog who up front, because of reactivity or fear or whatever the case, isn't interested in you?
The dog's not interested in me?
Yeah.
All right. So I have a lot of well, first let me tell you, there was a dog that was a feral dog that was caught in Korea. Okay. And it was put in a shelter. The whole shelter burned down with every dog in it except for that one. That dog, they found a home. I know it was horrible. Found a home in Brooklyn. The rescue organization called me and said, Brett, we need your help with this dog. I said, I don't drive to Brooklyn. They told me the story. I said, oh, shit. This dog was too fearful to see me.
Mm.
So I created a remote coaching program called the Irresistible Introvert. Okay. Cool. And what we did was we activated the seeking system 24 hours around the clock, right? So in situations like that, it's not me that needs to do the work to the dog. I'm not the hero. The owner's the hero. In many situations that the dog is not interested in the person working it, social deprivation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it. You know, we could be warm, but what we need to understand is at that point, I want spatial boundaries brings clarity to social awareness. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we need to understand dog respects my space. I respect the dog space. Mm-hmm. Dogs have an instinctual need for companionship. It's a survival instinctual need for companionship. If I sit here and live with the dog and I don't actually touch it for a few days and I don't talk to it for a few days and I don't show excitement for a few days and all I do is just exist with the dog for a few days, guess what's going to happen? The dog's going to start to get curious about me. Mm-hmm. And then once I get that curiosity, then I can start working the dog. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know? But I'm going to do other things to get the dog curious about other things.
Like what kind of stuff? Like food, places, create games.
So I like having them go overcome environmental pressure for their food. Mm-hmm. Nothing, no expectation. Just you got a whole obstacle course. You're going over, under, and through things. You know, I do that a lot of times. You know, we could do some scent work, but I try to eliminate social pressure. Mm-hmm. So with dogs like that, I eliminate all social pressure, right? I have no expectation from us until the dog starts getting curious, and then we start putting an expectation on it. And we start, you know, and it's that's difficult for people, you know, to sit here and
wait
and not the bottom to respect your dog's space. You know, people sit here and give me shit. I say, you know, like, you know, the bottom line is this is what you need to do to get a dog curious. If you're smothering your dog, it's not curious.
Right. It's overwhelmed, probably.
But as a shorter answer, real quick, I have fish oil in my bag for dog training, and it spilled all over and it got all over my back. And I went to a session with a very reactive dog, human aggressive, and it was so curious about me. It was like
sweet.
I didn't know I had fish oil on my back at that time. I found it at the end of the day, but I was like, "Wow, I'm doing so good."
Yeah, he just loves you.
Remember,
the owner's probably like, "This guy's a
activate
genius."
Curiosity. Yeah, activate curiosity, and it's the bridge to everything.
Okay.
Hey guys, it's Brent with the Dog Trainers Podcast. Now, did you guys know that if you leave us a review, it's easier for people to find us on their podcast platforms? So please go ahead and leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're on. We'd really appreciate it. And now let's get back to the show.